So now let's actually create something that's functional. So what we'll do is we're going to create an account controller that'll allow us to do two actions. It will allow us to create an account and it'll allow us to log into the system. We won't do both of those action implementations today. We'll just focus on login. But I wanted to kind of give you a perspective of how you can create a controller and how that controller is in charge of handling specific actions within your application. So for us, we're creating an account controller. It controls making and logging in and managing accounts. So we'll go to the controllers folder, we'll right click, we'll say add. Oh, I'm still in debug mode. So let's hit stop so we can actually manipulate our program. Right click on controller, add controller. We're going to stick with that empty template for now and we'll hit add. And then it asks us the name of the controller. This will be the account controller. And generally speaking, as you think about your app and how you architect and build your app, break it down into kind of those logical steps of what type of actions am I going to be performing on this application. And depending on the type of action you'll be doing, or set of actions, you'll want to then create an appropriate controller. So in our case, this is our account controller, which will manage all of our account actions. So we have a default template here with the account controller name, inheriting controller, and then an index action, which is our default action, and then that action result. So what we actually want here is not an index, but we want two other actions. We want a create action and a login action. So I'm going to leave the index there for now, but we'll get back to that in just a minute. So I'm going to start by just typing public action result. And the action result represents the output data, and I'll talk more about it as we deal with different types of action results, but the idea here is that there's this base class called action result, and that result is then passed back to ASP.NET MVC so that it knows what steps to take after the controller is done. So by default, there's a view action result or a view result, and what that is it says, okay, the resulting action is to show a view. So then it says what kind of view to show, model data for the view, and all of those different things like that. So that's kind of your default action result, if you want to think of it that way, is just returning a view result. Alright, so public action result, create, and this will allow us to create an account. So I'm going to go ahead and say return view. So we'll end up creating a create view for our account, and I like to put some notes in here. So if you // Visual Studio will give you an XML template to help describe what's happening. So this method, the summary for this method will be to create a user account for my application. And the returns, if there's something specific you want to describe, you can put it in here, but it returns the view result for the create. Alright. So we'll work on that in later videos. But the other one I want to look at is the public action result for login. And this will also return a view. And this one will be in charge of logging users into the website. Alright, so now we have three actions inside of our account controller. Now if someone manages to go to just /account and lands on our index, I want to actually redirect them to the login. So I'm going to change my return value, and I'm going to say return, and then I'll say this dot, so this controller class that we inherited from gives us a whole bunch of properties and methods, just like we saw with the view, and one of them is view. So that's when we call return view. We're actually calling this method that comes from the base class controller that comes out of system.web.mvc. And this method returns that view result. So we're actually just calling this method. And this method does all the mechanics and then returns the appropriate action result for us. So that's really nice. It's a nice little utility class that comes along with the inheritance. But we need to do a little bit more here. We need to do something different. So we have a lot of different data about the request and response that's handled, route data, server data. There's a lot of properties in here that are all very interesting and definitely worth looking at in terms of functionality. And some of them we'll touch on in later lectures. But what we want to do is we want to choose one of these methods to return a different kind of action result. So we can do different things like end execution, or we can send a file, or we can send an index or initialize, or we can return JavaScript or JSON. For this case, what we want to do is we're looking for one that allows us to do a redirect. So we're going to redirect. Oh, and here's a redirect. Well, actually, there's a whole collection of them. So we can redirect straight, and that will take in a string URL to redirect to. We can do redirect permanent, which will give us a different type of action result that will give us a different type of HTTP response. So within HTTP, we have different kinds of response codes. And redirects utilize those different response codes. Most of your redirects live inside of the 300 level response codes. And we'll talk more about those in a little bit. We have redirect to action. So that's redirecting to another action, which is what we're going to use in our case because we want to redirect to the login action. Redirect to action permanent, which again uses a different type of response code. We can redirect to a route. So when you think of it in more of a global or holistic sense, each one of these controllers and actions are part of a larger routing process. So depending on the route we want to take or the route we want to use, we could redirect to a route. So for now, we're going to redirect to action. Open parenthesis, and what it takes here is the name of the action as a string. So we want to say login. So this will result in our browser redirecting to the login action. So once we get all of that set up and in place, we are good to go with doing our login.